I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome the Special Envoy, Mr. Geert Pedersen, to his first briefing in the Security Council. Thank you for your briefing. We share many of the assessments that you expressed. And of course, perhaps one of the most important, the key words that you mentioned is the need to restore, rebuild lost trust, not just within Syria, but also around Syria, all of the players that are working on Syria. We welcome the stance of the Special Envoy on maintaining intensive contacts with the parties to the Syrian conflict and the key participants in efforts to settle the situation in Syria. And this, indeed, is the gauge of the success of any mediator. We believe it important to maintain a normal working dialogue with Damascus, which must be involved in all activities aimed at ramping up the political process and stabilizing the situation in the country. And incidentally, this also applies to the conference in Brussels in March. On the 22nd of January, we welcomed Mr. Pedersen to Moscow, where he had focused talks with the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defense, Messrs. Lavrov and Shoigu. Following this and subsequent meetings of the Special Envoy with Russian representatives, including the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Vershinin, and the Special Representative of the Russian President on Syria, Mr. Lavrentiev, we managed to get through the largely artificially created unpleasant incident which took place in December last year surrounding the formation of the Constitutional Committee. Along with the Special Envoy and our partners in the Astana format, Turkey and Iran, we are continuing efforts to further agree on the parameters for the launch of this mechanism, created in accordance with the decisions of the Syrian National Dialogue Congress and Security Council Resolution 2254. We trust that in good time soon it will be launched. We cannot but note the constructive contribution of Turkish and Iranian partners within the framework of the Astana process, which allowed us to achieve a qualitative change of the situation in Syria, ensuring a real cessation of hostilities on a large part of the country's territory and the beginning of direct dialogue between the government and the armed opposition. We trust that soon we, the Astana Troika, will manage to achieve mutually acceptable solutions on the Idlib de-escalation zone and also the northeast of Syria, along the lines of the understandings achieved at the trilateral summit of the presidents of Russia, Turkey and Iran in Sochi on the 14th of February. And of course, fully taking into account the position of the government of the Syrian Arab Republic. We intend to work, including gradually, step by step, to achieve the stated aims, which include eliminating the breeding ground of terrorism in Idlib and the protection of the civilian population. An endlessly frozen situation in the northwest of Syria, which has been taken under the control of fighters from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, cannot be left to remain. This must be understood by those who are proposing to sit with arms folded. We remind you that nobody wants to take pity on ISIL and freeze the situation in Hajin and Raqqa. Incidentally, there were many casualties among the civilian population there, and so we have to welcome the words of the distinguished representative of the United States, is essentially acknowledgement that the fight against terrorism cannot be a pretext for the destruction of the civilian population. We would like to highlight that in addition to de-escalation and political matters at the Astana platform, there are also discussions of such an important measure of strengthening confidence among the conflicting parties as the exchange of prisoners of war, which was raised by the Special Envoy today. The November 2018 and February 2019 exchanges may have been small in number, but they do allow us to hope for future progress in this direction. All of these measures facilitate the stabilization of Syria. An important area of work of the international community is rebuilding destroyed infrastructure and mine clearance. On the 21st of February, the government of the Russian Federation took the decision to allocate to the budget of the UN Mine Action Service resources to help efforts in mine clearance in the Syrian Arab Republic, and we call upon colleagues to join in those efforts. I shall allow myself to speak on behalf of the entire Astana Troika. We are open to cooperation with all interested parties that want sincerely, and I underscore that word sincerely, to facilitate stabilization and progress in the political settlement in Syria. The four-party summit in Istanbul in October 2018 was an important contribution to this process of building bridges. We underscore the situation in Syria has changed for the better. Many have acknowledged these changes that have taken place. We note the positive steps from states in the region that are aiming to normalize relations with Damascus. We trust that economic cooperation and participation in rebuilding the national economy of Syria will help to accelerate this process. We express hope that the stance on fully fledged restoration of relations of Arab countries with Syria and the rapid return of Damascus to the Arab family will provide substantial support to the process of the Syrian settlement in accordance with the fundamental principles of international law and the provisions of the UN Charter. Russia, in its national capacity as a member of the Security Council and a participant in the Astana Troika, stands ready to continue cooperation and working with the Special Envoy to restore peace to Syria. Mr. Pedersen, you can rely on our help. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his